Welcome to another episode of Kicking Tables. Today we'd like to welcome Stefan, Rachel, and Tony, the creators of Townsfolk Tussle and Panic Roll, all together as one.
Hello.
Welcome to Kicking Tables. Thank you so much for joining us. Why don't we, one of you, tell us about Townsfolk Tussle? Let's jump right in. Tell us what kind of game this is and kind of how it plays through.
Sure. So just to kick it off, Townsfolk Tussle is a 2 to 5 player co-op boss battler. If you couldn't tell by the graphics, the game is set in the 1930s vintage cartoon style.
Yeah, and so you play as a townsfolk in this town in Eureka Springs, and the sheriff recently died.
Uh-oh.
It may have been an accident, who knows? But so there's some no good ruffians that are coming to try and take over the town. And so you and your friends have to band together and protect Eureka Springs.
Mm-hmm.
So someone shot the sheriff.
Yeah.
Shot him, stabbed him, lit him on fire.
But they didn't shoot. They didn't shoot the deputy, so that's good.
No, not the deputy.
Nope.
Spoiler alert.
So you mentioned the 1930s cartoon styling to this. Which cartoons were sort of the inspiration behind this? And we also I get a little bit of a Cuphead vibe with this as well, with that being a more recent thing. But I'm old, so I remember the old cartoons, and that's what drew me to this. The old cartoon artwork. What was the inspiration?
Yeah. So at first, all three of us are huge fans of the 1930s cartoon style. Steamboat Willie, Silly Symphonies, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, we did a ton more research for this game. We were on YouTube like day and night just watching all of the old cartoons because that's where they all live.
Yeah.
Obviously, when Cuphead came out, we played the game. We loved it. It was really fun. And also, we just love what they did with this style. They also had, even though they were super 100% to the style, they had their own twist on it, and we kind of did the same thing as far as adding our own unique twist of like this level of darkness and grittiness through the style that we think is different.
Yeah, I would say that we definitely focus more on like the weird violence of Tom and Jerry than anything else. So it's like when you watch those cartoons, you're like, oh my god, he could have killed him with what he did. He just hit him with a frying pan at full speed. Like, if that was real, they would be dead. And we kind of pick up on that vibe of like, what if there was like this legitimate violence in this 1930s style? So there's little hints of that here and there of like, there's a jab and dagger that's coated in blood and some other dark elements, but we don't want to spoil too much.
Game's not for babies. All right, that's a lot of people. They see the cartoons, they're like, "Oh, this will be perfect for the whole family." It's like, maybe if a kid is mature enough to see somebody get cut in half.
Well, sure, and unless they see the blood dripping down the top of the box.
That's what we're saying. Look at the box.
It's not red paint either.
No.
Is there an Acme type company that you guys are have in the game? Like, I know like all the violence and everything like that, maybe that's what happened to the sheriff. He used the wrong Acme products or something like that.
I mean, we would love that. We have some ideas like going forward, like because we made a couple threads on Board Game Geek and Reddit, like what would you like to see, like what kind of items really interest you, and there were some amazing ideas that we were able to implement right away, but some that were like, this is bigger than that. Like you're right, we need like this Acme thing that's like branded, like send it into the town. Now they got branded weapons. Fantastic.
Well, I'll also say that if we're successful, the idea is that Townsfolk Tussle isn't just one and done, that this world can expand, but it depends on what ends up happening.
That is awesome. Now, Tony, you said some magic words for me personally, Tom and Jerry. I loved Tom and Jerry growing up. That was like one of my favorite shows to watch. That was awesome. Now that you said, Rachel, you said this is a 2 to 5 player game, and with it being a co-op boss battler, how much more difficult is it with the lower player counts versus 5 players? I can imagine with 5 players, you're all beating up on one boss together, but what if there's only 2 players? Is it going to be that much more difficult?
Well, thankfully, we've implemented the mechanics where There's a different health level and movement level per ruffian depending on how many players are playing.
Okay.
There's also a solo variant where you can play as 2 to 3 characters in the game. So for those situations, we've implemented some sort of balancing where a 2-player game can be just as hard as a 5-player game.
Okay.
Yeah, and we also are like, we have a Discord group and a group of play testers that have been awesome as far as giving us feedback for different player counts. Because naturally, we did most of our initial testing at 3, like the middle ground, and some at 4. For 2 players, we did a decent amount, but there's always things where it's like there's so many moving parts in the game that we want to cover everything. So we're still making edits to. Well, I'll go into a little more detail of how it works, but the ruffians, they're controlled by an action deck, kind of like they would be in KDM or a lot of these boss battlers. And we're implementing things that will only affect 4+ players or 3+ players. So there's situations where if you're at a lower player count, those people will get a break or possibly a bonus.
Okay. Now, when you say player count, it's basically the number of players in the game, because if you're playing 2 physical players, each of them could control 2 characters.
Ideally,
so is that still what would you consider a 4-player game, 4-character game, really?
Yeah. So ideally, if you're controlling multiple townsfolk, that's really like a solo variant type of thing. If you're doing things by the book, it's if you're 1 player, you're playing as 1 townsfolk.
Okay.
So we have a solo variant, but the thing is, it's a very social game in a sense, where you would prefer if people play with a group.
Of course.
That's actually something that we think really separates our game from other boss battlers. Although you can play by yourself, the game really shines when you play with your friends, because aside from like the whole co-op experience and working together, we have elements where there's like a slight bit of competition between you and your friends. There's like secret objectives that you're trying to achieve, so that even though you all win together, one person can win like just a little bit more, It's like because everybody at the same time, while they're trying to defeat these ruffians, they're also trying to be sheriff too. So there's that little push and pull.
Now, speaking of secrets, I understand there's end game secrets. So depending on how each game ends, you get something. Like, how does that work? Is that hidden things that are then added to the game, kind of like a legacy style thing? What's going on there? I know the back of the instruction booklet is like, don't read this, because these are end game bonuses. Tell us a bit about how that works without spoilers, obviously.
Yeah, there's 3-ish different endings per final fight. So every time you battle a ruffian, there's going to be 3 different ways 3 different results that you can read in the back of the book. There's a win story, a loss story, and then if you win with the special objective, there's a different story that you can read. Okay. And then if you were to accomplish this special objective, then there's that secret that you get.
And those items or whatever it is that you unlock, they're available in all future games. And one of the main things that we did, mostly for replayability, is alternative starting gear. Since gear is very important for all these players you choose, it'll change how they play dramatically. So one person might go from being a support character to being pure damage just based on the starting gear that they have.
Wow.
Yeah, the idea was not to have anything be like better, but to just change how you play, just to add to that whole idea that we're trying to increase replayability as much as possible.
So speaking of that, you mentioned that no 2 playthroughs are gonna be the same. Like, is that the main thing? Is how the characters are gonna react, or is it like different maps or different scenarios?
I mean, kind of all of the above. We have like all of our characters we like to think are very unique. All of the ruffians that you fight, they all fight in different ways. Some of them like kind of hit and run. Some of them jump all around the board. Some of them deal with your money. So they all do different stuff.
Yeah, and on top of that, there's also, depending on where you find them, so you're going to fight 4 over the course of the game. If you find them in the first round versus the 3rd or 4th round, they're going to play very different. So they'll gain a new ability if you find them in the 3rd round. If you fight them in the final fight, their whole setup changes. So instead of just being knock their health board down to 0, you might have to dig up some graves in order to collect money, or you might need to stay away from a giant wave that can knock you out in 1 hit.
Wow.
So we're trying to give variety in a sense where even if you've played someone before, the second time you meet them, it might be dramatically different.
and then we just have a ton of items too. It's like like the stack is like this big, so it's like
it got a little out of control.
I don't think you can ever get too far out of control when it comes to that sort of thing.
Right. So not only are you going to face different bosses each time, you're going to face different bosses in different spots or different rounds, which completely changes the dynamic of every gameplay. So so in that sense, it really is never the same game twice, and that's fantastic. And as you're talking about that wave that's just going to knock you out, I'm getting visions of Cuphead again. That's so unbelievably difficult to play to begin with. I'm like, oh no, it's Cuphead in a board game.
Definitely tried to make things a little more balanced, so there's never going to be that situation of like, this is just impossible.
Okay, good.
But we also wanted to have that like old cartoon feel where it's like maybe you have billowy pants that can drag you around the field, or maybe you have an extendo pole that can extend your arms by half the map. Yes. So we want those little elements, and we want to have like a balance to go along with it.
Yeah, on the difficulty thing, another one of our major inspirations was Kingdom Death Monster. Like we played that, and it was brutal. We had fun, but it was really hard. And very long and all those things. And we played and we were like, well, we love this game. We love the whole concept, but how can we make this kind of more approachable?
Right.
You know, how can we make this attainable to people that maybe don't like play board games day and night? So that was one of our goals when we developed Townsfolk Tussle. And, you know, in testing with different people, a lot of people that we've tested with weren't even gamers, really.
Wow.
I mean, they, you know, maybe play Monopoly, maybe play, you know, that kind of stuff. But I think we found that Townsfolk Tussle is a great kind of stepping stone to those like really complicated games.
Well, difficulty-wise, what have you found in your playtesting? How often are people winning versus losing? What's your ratio there?
It's about, I want to say, 65 to 70% win rate. But we're trying to make it almost exactly 50.
Okay.
That's ideal. And it's also like a cascading effect. Hopefully you can get past the first ruffian at least. But there are cases where you can't. Like if you just have the worst luck on the planet, or you just prepare very poorly. Because unlike some of these other like boss battler games, we try to put a lot of focus on just strategy in general. We don't want it to be that you go up to the ruffian, you smack them once, and then you run away. We want this to be like, look at the environment you're working with. Terrain is a very big deal. So instead of just being like, this thing blocks your way, maybe it's a house that you can go to the front door and ask for help. You can get a Band-Aid. You can get them to take their shotgun and shoot the ruffian. Or maybe there's TNT that you can blow up and maybe even hurt your teammates in the process.
Right. Now, you've had the fortunate ability to have your sneak peek edition out there to reviewers and playtesters for a while now. What have you learned from these playtesters and from these reviews? And has anything changed in the game since getting that feedback? So how different is the game going to be hitting Kickstarter versus your sneak peek edition?
There's been a lot of changes, actually. Yeah, we've like from the sneak peek previews, but also just from having it up on Tabletop Simulator, we've gotten so much feedback, and Tony's been like tweaking a lot of Ruffian's actions and things like that. One of the things we already mentioned was the player count difference, right? So we have certain moves that really only hit if you have more players.
Okay.
We implemented this like critical hit bonus. So if you get a critical hit, you roll and something special could happen. You could whiff, and like maybe the ruffian like immediately takes an action, or you could hit them so hard that you knock some piece off of them, and you immediately get some kind of special gear that you can then equip and use in the fight against them.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of us getting feedback, and it was like people like the game, but we're trying to figure out like how can we make them like enjoy it more. What were their favorite parts? And there was something, the critical hit, for instance. We have items in the game that if you land a critical hit, meaning a natural roll of 10, you get some sort of bonus. But naturally, all a critical hit used to mean was that you hit no matter what. People usually roll a 10, they get super excited, and then when they realize, like, oh, it just means I hit for sure, they were like, oh, I wish there was more. So in response, we made this system where your critical hits can roll on a chart. So maybe you'll be able to smack at their legs and lower their movement, or like Stefan was saying, you just rip a part of them off, and then you could equip it and use it to be silly.
Nice.
At the
I
same
wonder.
time, we also have like a whiff too. So now, if you roll a 1, you're gonna miss regardless. And that was something else that we were thinking of too, because there are ways you can increase your accuracy, and you never want to have a situation where it was like, oh, I just hit no matter what. So we want to incorporate
Okay.
that.
I want to know what some of your favorite characters or cards in the game are. Have you guys, this is obviously your baby. Which are the ones that you guys sort of are more partial to for the characters and for like some of the cool cards that you've designed?
Well, I think my favorite character, and I think it's kind of true across the board, is Granny Melba. She's old, but she's kick-ass.
Oh, she packs a punch. Yeah.
She's a really strong DPS character. She shoots her Rudy Tutor.
Mm-hmm.
And just combining other guns with her is just a great combo that I feel like please go for.
A dual-wielding granny.
Dual wielding.
Yeah.
Yeah, personally, I like Norman Fishboy. I have an affinity for fishing, so anything regarding fishing I always love. But he starts out with his rod. He's got long arms, so he's got better reach than average. And he could always throw a fish at the ruffian, which I think is super fun.
Yeah, mine is definitely a toss-up between Yancey and Quintus, because like Yancey is great because he's a tank and he can taunt.
Is Yancey the anvil head guy?
He is.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
He got the anvil head, and yeah, he can taunt and a lot of times save his friends, which is cool. But at the same time, if you play Quintus instead, he's a troublemaker, and so he can like switch places with another townsfolk, and like depending on what you're trying to do, you might end up knocking them out and making things better for yourself.
Right.
So yeah, they're both cool.
That's awesome.
So, sorry. Did you guys have any like really fun stories, about the early playtesting days? Like any really fun scenarios that came up for you?
I think something that we noticed across the board was that every time we played, whether it was just us three or with other people, was that every time you gear up your townsfolk or bring them into town and there's a weird, quirky town event that happens, you kind of feel like that's your character. You feel like it's unique and you've made it your own. So we'll play Townsfolk Tussle even now today, and it's kind of like, oh, Henlo's wearing horse blinders and has a weird bloody wand, and she's doing crazy stuff all over the board. And it's like a funny story that happens throughout the game that in every gameplay is always different.
We've noticed a lot of like gameplay drama from the actual board bleeding into like the real world.
Oh, so, really?
Like I was mentioning with Quintus, like the last time we played, I was playing Quintus and I was just like moving everyone around the board. Everybody was getting pissed off, like, and that's just an awesome experience to be able to like affect change in that kind of way while you're playing the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my personal favorite was actually the ruffian was very low health, and Quintus sacrificed his life by attacking an outhouse, by hurting himself and knocking himself out in order to take out the ruffian. It built this fun camaraderie between like all the characters, where it's like he's sacrificing himself for the greater good of the town. But yeah, every time we play, we get these weird moments where it's like, we've never had Yancey wielding 2 wands before. We never had Quintus somehow turn into the healer when he's usually some sort of troublemaker.
Right.
So yeah, it's something we didn't expect, but it's a side effect of just having so many like town events and items and things that can change up the game.
Well, yeah, and just talking about the items, even on the board setup for each character, for each the enemies that come out. My mind went blank as to what you're calling them. The ruffians, thank you. Each ruffian has their own board setup, but each of the obstacles, the players can actually interact with them and use them as like to take out the ruffian. The bear trap, the old jalopy. You can even knock on the door of the barn and get the person who lives there to shoot the ruffian for you. It's I love the fact that you can interact with all the obstacles on the board and actually use it to your advantage. That is really cool. So it's not just you against the enemy. You can use the environment to help you as well.
Yeah, that was definitely a huge part of the game, because it was one of those things where again, with KDM, Kingdom Death Monster, when we were playing, we always felt like some of our terrain, although it was, I mean, we loved the game, some of the obstacles were just like, this is just blocking the way. We didn't really want that feeling for a lot of it. We wanted, oh, you're in a dangerous ditch? Well, this thing is going to hinder your movement, but if you stop inside, maybe you could search around for some trash since it's littered with garbage.
Right.
Or maybe if it's the wishing well, maybe you could throw in some coins and make a wish, and maybe something will happen. Maybe you'll get granted an item, or maybe you'll get a healing wish. Just different things that can really, during the gameplay, don't expect to use it, but then suddenly it's like, wow, I really need a heal, or oh, I could really use an item to help take out this guy because he somehow destroyed mine.
Yeah,
I mean, but they're not all good, right? They can help you and hurt you. Like, for example, a lot of time in a lot of the fights, there's a cornfield. You can go in there, and if you start your turn in there, you have to roll to see. You might get lost in the cornfield, and then you have to skip your turn. But at the same time, if you roll really well, you could find an item in the cornfield. So, it can help you and hurt you.
Or if you stand next to the buzzing hive at the beginning of your turn, you take a damage. But if you pull the ruffian closer to the buzzing hive, then they take a damage. It's the style and the theme of the game kind of lends itself to having interactable terrain. So it's like, why wouldn't that outhouse explode on you and do 2 damage to you? Like, why not?
Right? I could just imagine every round of Townsfolk Tussle being its own cartoon. You watch everybody play,
I wish.
write down everything that happens, and then make an animated version of that battle. It would work so well, and it would be amazing, and you'd have an unlimited set of cartoons. After Kickstarter is done, once you've hit fulfillment, if people are just discovering it after you're all done, will they be able to buy it in retail? What's the plans for post-Kickstarter?
Right now, we have no plans for retail mostly because we're just 3 people and we don't really know the business. You know what I mean?
Fair.
So since this is our first go around, we're just seeing if people like us. Do people like what we have to offer? Do people like the game? And if they do, we'll see where things go from there. I mean, as of right now, it's just going to be on Kickstarter. We also work full time, so it's like this is kind of like a side project. So if we have to then manage figuring out other game stuff, it might be a little complicated, but it's all going to come down to how the game is received, if people like it or not like us.
I mean, it's like I mentioned. Hopefully we're successful and we have the opportunity to bring more content to the game, and we've got loads of other ideas. So,
well, for your very first game, honestly, the quality is just superb. It is an absolute beautiful game. The artwork, the minis, just the way the game plays, it is brilliant. It really is. And I haven't even played it yet. I've only seen what people have been unboxing and TTS playthroughs. But I am in love with your game already, and I haven't even seen it in real life. So I think you've definitely got a winner. I know Tico is in love with it too.
I'm huge fan of this. I caught wind of this ages ago. I'm like, well, we gotta get these guys on the show.
Yeah.
I would love to, wanted to know so much more about this. So yeah, I don't think you guys are going to have a problem getting funded one bit.
I certainly hope not.
I mean, we're just 3 people, like Stefan said, and every aspect of the game we've done ourselves. Stefan and I learned the art style 3 or 4 years ago without having specialized in it before, so we did a lot of research. Tony did all the mechanics for the game, balance, everything, day and night, and he also learned how to do ZBrush to do the minis himself.
Wow.
I never did modeling up until 4 years ago.
Wow,
and that
nice.
was learning process. Yeah.
That is fantastic.
All the praise that we're getting and stuff is just we're super thankful. Thank you.
Well, I think you've got a winner. I really hope it gets backed. Good luck to you on your campaign, and thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thanks for having us.
All right, thanks everybody for watching. We're on Kickstarter October 20th, so please subscribe. Please back us, and then subscribe below to Kicking Tables.